Isn't it great how in sci-fis, whenever you're looking to hook up, all the parts always match up? Well, you're right, that's not likely going to be the case, even assuming all species are biologic binaries like on Earth. Though, at times, some sci-fis do try to introduce non-binary species, they're not always successful. With that in mind, this is the Polyverse, and today the storyboard presents a compendium of non-biological binaries and how they might work, from least to complicated. Feel free to like and subscribe. Break for intro. And we're back. The simplest non-binary would of course be monogender. Fans of the popular game franchise Mass Effect might immediately visualize the Asari, blue-skinned seductresses of the Council races. They can participate in home sports and activities with any race in the galaxy, and when you live for hundreds to thousands of years, you can really get around. But they are not technically sexual creatures. In fact, all they're really looking for is your mind, not your genes. They just let the other partner have a little fun while they take what they need. There actually is a creature that did harvest DNA from other species that existed thousands of years ago before sexual reproduction existed. This species, called the Deltoids, linked to an article above if you're really interested. Though they technically did not participate in sex, if their evolution was not halted by other species, they could actually evolve into almost Asari species. What monogendered really comes down to is all of those people within that species have the same parts. They can either be mother or father, depending on what mood strikes them. They would really be the most gender fluid of all species in this list. Number 2 on the list is a transitional bigender, age-related. At first, this seems a little creepy, and for humans it would be. I mean, hooking up with someone potentially less than half your age is something that we frown upon in human society. But remember, we didn't really have a problem with multi-centenarian aliens breeding with minimum ventigenarian individuals. The basic functionality of this group would be, first, you go through a non-sexual phase, your prepubescence. After prepubescence, you'd have a puberty, at which point this species would be within the maiden phase, in essence able to bear children. After this phase, a second puberty would happen, going into a third phase of life. Patriarch phase, when you would be able to sire children. Now, technically it could be reversed with a gelding phase before a matron phase, but when you think about it, bearing children might actually be a little bit easier if you're a little bit younger. For this species, every partner would understand what they need because they've experienced before and they would know what is needed. The third is a transitional bigender B, environmental related, which would mean that environmental cues such as pheromones, weather, population density, etc. would cause a shift in population ratios as needed for the society to adapt to changing situations. With more room to expand, there may be more females. With less room to expand, there may be more males. This would be like certain species of frogs or clownfish. As more women are needed, males may transition into females. As more males are needed, females would transition into males, keeping the population in balance. But it would not be as desired, it would be as needed. Meaning that for at least the first few thousand years of existence, you could not choose to change, though with changes in science and technology, it would allow the population to shift as they want. Though this may or may not occur. It would all depend on equilibrium. This fourth type of gendered society would be the first three-gendered society. But it wouldn't be a true three-gendered society. It would be 2 breeding genders and 1 non-breeding gender. Basically, 2 genders participate in reproduction, 1 gender doesn't. Similar to insect colonies, and like insect colonies, the first type would have 1 or a small amount of females to service the entire community. This would not likely be a fair situation, as in order to keep population up, well, the females of the society wouldn't really have much freedom, and they would be very busy. Unless, of course, this race was externally fertilized, basically meaning the females would lay the eggs, which would then be fertilized and gestate in the environment. Then you would have a second type of 2 breeding genders and 1 non-breeding gender. But in this case, it would be a single or small number of males to service the population. At first, this may not seem particularly fair, as there's a small amount of males getting a lot of action from a lot of different females. But really, it would be more fair than a small group of females getting all that action from so many males. This may conjure images of harem joys, but that much action for that long, basically all their lives, may not be all that great. As with the previous entry, the one or few amount of males would really not have that much freedom, and they might not actually even run the place at all, for if they die, the community dies. Therefore, that single or small amount or small group of males would really live in seclusion and isolation and only exist for the purposes of breeding. For many people, not really that great of a prospect. I do have a story of such a race. You can pick the I or the link below. The 6th type would be trigendered pair bonding. This would mean that there are 3 different genders, any 2 of which could breed. Kind of like a transition between true 2-gendered and true 3-gendered. How this would work? Yeah, this sounds complicated at first, but it's really kind of quite simple. First, you have pair A. Genders 1 and 2 would copulate like birds and or lizards, with gender 1 laying eggs and gender 2 fertilizing the eggs. Potential pair B would be genders 2 and 3. They could copulate like mammals, with gender 2 acting as a living incubator. Then you would have potential pair C, with genders 3 and 1, who could also copulate like birds, with gender 1 laying the egg and gender 3 fertilizing the egg. With this type of society, one may expect to see a lot of political intrigue and courtly maneuvers. But then again, 3 is the most stable number, so who knows? Maybe it'd be more stable than our society. But I think it would probably be a complicated situation, to say the least. Now we would get into true 3-gendered societies. We would have 2. Entry 7 is true 3-gender type A. They would be the egg-bearing type. This is the point at which things would get complicated. We would potentially have triple helixes instead of our own double helix, and or triple gene sets as opposed to our dual gene sets. In this case, it would take all 3 genders at once in order to produce viable offspring. This would be a little bit complicated. Now, assuming all the participants are at actual maturity, you would have gender 1 emitting ready pheromones that primes other genders. Genders 2 and 3 would then copulate, producing a fertilizable egg that would then be laid by, say, gender 2. Now, assuming a cycle similar to humans, there may be a point at which unfertilizable eggs are produced. Who knows what they would do with these? I don't know. Now, if a fertilizable egg is laid, then gender 1 would then fertilize that fertilizable egg. At which point gestation would proceed similar to reptiles or avian. And upon hatching, they would go through maturity phases just like here on Earth. The second true 3-gendered society, true 3-gender B, would be live birthing or marsupial type. Again, all genders would be needed to produce viable offspring. The explanation for this would go rather similar to the A type. Assuming maturity of all participants, gender 1 would emit ready pheromones that prime the other 2 genders. Genders 2 and 3 would copulate, producing a zygote, which would then proceed to a fetus within genders 2 womb and would mature over a certain period of time. Times when cycles don't match up could result in that uncomfortable subject that no one really wants to hear about, especially on YouTube. As fetal maturity occurs, it would then be born, at which time gender 1 would take control back by accepting this proto-baby into their marsupial pouch. At this time, the baby would consume a mother's milk, which could be similar to human milk. But instead of just nutrition and antibodies, this could include other enzymes and proteins, which might start a different change, similar to an insect going through a pupal stage, after which time the child would be born again. Now, is it possible that 4 genders could exist? Yeah, I really don't think so. Even at 3 genders, it would be kind of sticky. And nature tends to favor simple over complicated. Now, if a fourth gender is indeed viable, then it would more likely involve a combination of trigendered A and B, which would include egg-laying and a marsupial gestation phase. But of course, if it is possible that there is three genders, any two of which could produce viable offspring, you could have four genders, any two of which could produce viable offspring, or even four genders, any three of which could produce viable offspring. But again, that is exceptionally complicated, and nature does not like complication. That is our look at our potential non-binary biological genders. If you like this presentation, you may also enjoy our other presentations about other aspects of sci-fi and entertainment. The Polyverse also has voice novels. Again, feel free to like and subscribe. Comment below. Let us know what you think. That's a wrap.